Welcome back to another episode of the PigX podcast. I'm your host, Delaney Howell. Today we're looking into the connection between manure pumping on swine farms and the potential exposure of manure applications to the operation, specifically in relation to two diseases: porcine reproductive and respiratory syndrome virus, otherwise known as PRRS, and porcine epidemic diarrhea virus, otherwise known as PEDV. This research focuses on wean-to-market pigs across the Midwest. We're discussing findings from a recent study conducted by Dr. Paula Serafini, Poeta, Silva, a research scientist from the College of Veterinary Medicine at Iowa State University. She analyzed nearly 2,600 wean-to-market lots across nearly 600 sites between July of 2020 and December of 2022. The study used a matched case control design to identify patterns and risk factors, while PEDV outbreaks were not. Before we get into the details, let's meet today's guest and hear more about her background and what led her to the swine industry.
So I got a DVM in Brazil in 2015, and my focus during the DVM and also master's degree where I got in Brazil, same university, was in swine health, production, and also epidemiology and population and animal medicine. And then I came to Iowa State to do a PhD in the population animal medicine as a major with a minor in statistics here at the Veterinary Diagnostic and Population Animal Medicine Department at Iowa State University.
So then, Anna, what brought you to start working on the pit pumping study specifically?
Yeah, so this project is one of the projects that I did during my postdoc here at, with the field app team. I started the postdoc in 2022. Soon after I finished I defend my PhD. So the manure pumping is related to the biosecurity. So at that time, at the end of 2022, the Swine Health Information Center opened a call for to improve biosecurity in swine farms. So the manure pumping fits well in that category because all the logistics procedures that's involved in the manure pumping could bring breaches to the biosecurity for the pig farms. So that was the main how we started. So we work with one swine system here in the Midwestern in the United States, exploring data to understand and also to quantify the manure pumping and also spraying to the crop fields, the relationship with outbreaks for two pathogens in swine, the Porcine Reproductive and Respiratory Syndrome Virus, or PRRS, and the Porcine Epidemic Diarrhea, the PED.
To start off, can you share some background on the research you conducted? What, Anna, were you specifically looking into, and what questions were you hoping to answer through this study?
So we use retrospective data for that study. So the swine system manages a large portion of the pumping operation. And when I say pump, is the pumping out of the site, but also the spraying, the manure spread to the crop field. So that system manages a large portion, the majority of those operations for the sites within that system. So besides that, we have this pumping data, including dates, procedures used, such as the manure was pumped out, used, and was spread to the crop field using a drag hose or trucks. How many acres was covered using that manure? How many gallons was applied to the crop field? The distance where that manure was applied from the site that was receiving the site where the crop fields are surrounding that specific site. The ventilation type of the farm, so those are more farm characteristics, such as ventilation or natural or tunnel. The site type, if it was a finisher, nursery, or a wean-to-finish. The size of the sites, we classify less than 5K pigs, or between 5 and 10K pigs, or more than 10K pigs. We also have data on the outbreak reports from the veterinaries of that swine system, and also the detection of the pathogens, PRRS and PED in tissues to determine or be associated with disease and potentially revealing what was an outbreak. We also use georeferencing data where we create buffers surround each site of that swine system. So we create buffers of 1 mile, 3 miles, and 5 miles. So we know that which are the neighboring sites of each specific site of that system. So to understand if like a site spraying manure surrounded a specific site could affect this site in terms of outbreak. So, and then we put out together this data. We have two goals here with all this data. So we select lots that are placed between June 2020 and December 2022 from the swine systems, and we separate the analysis into buckets. So the first bucket was to quantify the odds or the risk of outbreaks by PRRS and PED in association with the manure pumping from the site and also the receiving manure to the nearby crop field from that specific site that broke with the disease. So for that, we want to understand, we focus in a time window of 5 weeks after the pumping event. So we want to understand within 5 weeks, what's the odds or what's the risk of the PRRS or PED for those sites. To do this comparison for this first bucket of analysis, we did a matching, a case control matched by the space, so the location of the sites, the time as well, the time of placement of pigs. So a site that has a lot of pigs with a break, what was matched, it was matched with another lot in this sharing a space and a time as well of placement dates. And also if there is a pumping or a receiving event, the date was also matched. So we have to do this comparison as well. For the second bucket of analysis, we identify the risk factors or the variables associated that are related to the manure and receiving manure with the PRRS outbreak. So for that second bucket, we are going to only use from all the data that was aggregated, we are going to be only using sites that pumped or received manure from a different site. And then we could compare sites that had the outbreak versus sites that did not have the outbreak. So with that aggregation, we could do two types of analysis that kind of brought a lot of highlights on how we can improve our manure pumping procedures, because we know that manure pumping is going to happen because due the storage space under the pits of those swine sites, and also the need as a fertilizer for the crop fields.
That was a lot of great information. So let's break it down a bit further. Can you walk us through exactly what you were analyzing in the study? What data points or patterns were you focusing on?
So to start with the first bucket of analysis, where we quantify the incidence of outbreaks for PRRS and PED, and the association with the manure exposure of pumping out of the pit or receiving the manure in the nearby field. So for that, we identify which lots within a site broke with PRRS and PED. After that, we identify within in a cluster of 30 kilometers of size other sites that did not have PRRS and have the same dates of placements, or within 2 weeks of difference of the placement dates, and also if they have the manure pumping or manure receiving event. So those sites or those lots are matched to be compared with each other. So to compare sites that are exposed and had the outcome. In this case, sites that are exposed that they had the pumping and they broke with PRRS, and sites that are non-exposed and did not have the outcome. So sites that did not pump and did not have the outbreak, or you have also to compare sites that pump and did not have the outbreak, or did not pump and had the outbreak. So we create those, let's say, 2x2 tables to estimate or to quantify the odds of that association. And we found that the odds of a PRRS outbreak within 5 weeks post the pumping event was 3.4 times higher in sites that pumped compared to sites that did not pump. Now, for the receiving manure association, we found that sites that receive the manure at a distance of 1 mile had 4 times higher the odds of break with PRRS compared to the sites that did not receive the manure within 1 mile. We did the same analysis for receiving manure up to 3 miles, and we found that the sites that receive manure up to 3 miles, they had 3.0 times higher odds to break with PRRS if they receive the manure compared to those ones that did not receive manure. So all these three associations, they are all significant with a p-value less than 0.05. We also did the same analysis for receiving manure up to 5 miles, so a larger distance, and we found that there is no significant association when the manure was applied to a field up to 5 miles compared to not apply any manure.
So looking at PRRS and PEDV, were there differences in biosecurity concerns between the two viruses?
Yes. So with this study, we found out that, so based on this data set, in this reality, pumping out of the pit and this manure spreading to the crop field was associated with PRRS only. Regarding PED, we didn't found any association with PED and manure pumping. So a couple hypotheses and also facts that could explain this lack of association. The first one is that we had a small number or a limited number of PED outbreak reports within this period of the study that was between July 2020 and December 2022. So that was a constraint of our analysis, the limited number of PED outbreaks in those populations. So limited number of outbreaks, that doesn't mean that they are not happening, is because could be like a under-report or a under-diagnosis in those populations. The other situation is that with this data set, we observed that the more than 80% of the outbreaks of PED are occurring within three weeks, in the first three weeks post placement. That could mean that the PED outbreaks are more likely to be associated with the transportation of those pigs than the pumping. So that means that we didn't have sites that broke with PED that was after a pumping event. So they didn't not have enough time to break with PED post pumping, because we saw a higher frequency of the PED breaks occurring after the transportation. And that is aligned with what you see in the fields and also in the research published of this relationship of PED and transportation. With PRRS was different. We have a higher number of PRRS outbreaks to work with, and a higher distribution, let's say, of these PRRS outbreaks occurring over the whole period of the wean to finish phases. So that could be the explanation in the differences of biosecurity for those pathogens. PRRS are going to be in the environment. Both agents can be found in the manure. Mainly, they can be found in manure. They survive longer periods in the manure when the manure is colder, like around around 4 degrees Celsius. There is some research showing that PED and PRRS can survive in the manure for 28 days when the manure was 4 degrees Celsius.
What did you feel like came out of that research as far as things to be aware of at
Mhm.
more of a swine production level? Because, we do this research, and then how does that translate to those working in the swine system day to day?
Yes. So focusing on PRRS here, we have with the second bucket of analysis, we could identify risk factors related to pumping in spraying manure that increased the odds of PRRS in those sites. The first one was that if the previous lot placed in that site, if that previous lot had PRRS, had a PRRS outbreak report, and then the analyzed lot that we were measuring the pumping fact had the pump, they had 3.5 times higher odds to have the PRRS outbreak when they're pumped compared to lots that did not have PRRS in the previous lot. The other important factors that we found the trend is that nursery and the larger sites are going to be more likely to have an outbreak post after the pumping. And that could be related to the age of animals and the not having the immunity system in full capacity to deal with the PRRS infection, given that pumping is going to happen, and when happens has the chance to recirculate the PRRS that's down in the pit or in the lagoon, and it can contaminate other surfaces of the farm, and that PRRS could be viable to start an infection, or those animals, they may be infected with PRRS, but because they are stable and you have this pumping event that could be a stressor, that infection could be showing up with the outbreak onset and related clinical signs to PRRS. Aligned with that, we also saw that the pumping week in relation to the placement week, was an important factor. So when the pumping event occur between the first to the fourth week post placement, the odds of PRRS outbreak was almost 6 times compared to the when the pumping event occur after the 17th week post placement. So that could help the producers to align expectations and think about preventive measures for the younger populations, try to delay the pumping dates as much as possible. And if you're going to pump a nursery or a large farm, think about some early medication to prevent or to ameliorate the effects of the PRRS infection in that population.
So, where do we go from here? What are you hoping this research will lead to, whether it's future studies or changes in on-farm practices?
Yeah, so I think this paper shows some highlights where we can pay more attention when we are doing this practice. So more research on studying the preventive medication before pumping, if that could help to ameliorate the consequences of the outbreak on those animals. More research in terms of cleaning, disinfection of pumping equipment, pumping transportation, such as drag hoses and also the trucks. Maybe some more research on ways to decrease the chances of that manure to have pores, or some research on like something to even eliminate or decontaminate the manure under the pit of that pathogens, not only for PRRS but other pathogens, even PED, PRRS, any other bacteria that could be residing in that manure.
We covered a lot of information today about the connection between manure handling practices and their potential impact on disease outbreaks, specifically PRRS and PEDV, and how swine producers can use this research to inform their management decisions. For those interested in diving deeper, we've got linked information in the show notes, including details on how this research was conducted and the full results. A big thank you to Dr. Anna for joining us on today's episode of the PigX podcast. And thanks to all of you for tuning in this month. Be sure to join us again next month for another timely episode on all things swine. Until then, I'm Delaney Howell, and this has been the PigX podcast.
PigX is a national podcast hosted by the Pig Livability Project partners at Iowa State University, Kansas State University, and Purdue, and supported by the Iowa Pork Industry Center. For more information on the project, head to www.piglivability.org, or to inquire directly with questions regarding the project, email ipic.iastate.edu. PigX, ideas in the swine industry worth sharing.